by the time he gets it set up, we'll go home. All set? Okay, it's now 7 o'clock. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And as customary, can we have a moment of silence, please? I have to announce this meeting is being recorded and televised by WHCA. Do I have, and I need a motion to approve bill and payroll warrants?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to accept correspondence in the read file. Do I hear a motion?
So moved. Second.
All right. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. We're now into public forum. Anybody here wish to speak that's not something on not an agenda? No, seeing none. Okay, one thing on the agenda, fiscal 26 budget contingency plans. Mary Beth.
Thank you. So I have considered several different fiscal 26 budget contingency plan scenarios over the past few weeks, all of which will result in a variety of reductions to the town's current staffing levels. These reductions will in turn impact the services the residents of Whitman currently receive. Departmental budgets will be scaled back to a minimum level before staffing reductions are considered. It's our intention to keep any reductions in staffing and reductions to services to a minimum level. However, the town could be facing reductions of up to 14 positions across the various town departments. If the override does not pass, the only option to balance the budget and close the deficit for fiscal 26 is to reduce staffing. At this time, all options are still being considered. However, all of the options, of course, are less than ideal. So I don't know, do you want to speak?
Yes, yeah, any comments? Yes, John.
Yeah, I think there could be a couple different strategies with an override, like try to get the most shock value, that kind of thing. And I don't support that. I think if we have to put together a contingency plan and it's got to be up to 14, you said, I thought it was a little bit low, but you think it's about 14 full-time?
Looking at about
full-time employees. I think we tried to do it in the least impactful way possible. The combination, and you think it's likely going to affect all the town departments,
Not all of them. I mean, all of them in some way as far as their expense lines. I mean, I've really pulled everything back before we took the last step to reduce staff. But you have tiny departments, planning board and bylaw study committee and, little departments like that we can't make any adjustments in. But all the major departments will have some reductions in expenses, of course, or in staffing.
Yeah. And looking at free cash as well, I know there's been some discussion online about the use of free cash, and for me, I feel like we have some use of free cash that's in line with our financial policy embedded in the budget to about $340,000 of free cash. And for me, I think those are acceptable uses because, it's short-term use. It's not paying for like personnel and regular budgetary items. I would not support using free cash beyond what we currently have in the budget. I will not. And I don't know if other individuals might be considering that or whatnot, but for me personally as a selectman and, coming through the finance committee, I will not do that. So for me, I think I want to share that message with the people of the town that this isn't like a shock scare tactic. Like we're going to put this much up for the contingency budget, and then if things failed, all of a sudden we found an extra $500,000 or something like that. For me, that's not on the cards at all for me. I'm being completely upfront about that.
Can I add to that as far as free cash? And I did speak with John Adams in the accounting department today, former financial director, and of course I know as well. Free cash is one-time money that we don't want to use for our recurring expenses. We don't want to use for Article 2. One of the reasons that we're in the situation we're in this year is because we used free cash last year. If we were ever to use a large amount of free cash this year, I mean, it's not even a Band-Aid. It's just a bad fiscal, move. And so if you do that, you're not having any free cash to go to our capital needs, which is the number one source for all of our capital, to take care of any projects that need to be done, to fund our cruisers and, the vehicles and the upkeep on the buildings. And if you just start going down that path and using free cash to close the budget, eventually that will affect our auditors won't look, very well on that. So we could see some audit concerns for that reason. Also, our rating agencies, when we get rated, they take that into consideration. If you have healthy reserves, if you're using free cash for your capital needs, so if they see that you're using that for your budget too, we could be downgraded in the future. Then if we go to borrow in the future, we could be borrowing at higher rates, have our rating brought down, and none of those things are very good for the town. So using free cash, I would definitely not support that at all. Other than the 340 that we discussed, and we had reasons for using the 340. The pension liability, 200,000 towards that, and that's because the pension liability at this time is expected to be paid off in 2030. The Plymouth County retirement pension liability. Once that's paid up, that will be freeing up quite a bit of money for our budget annually, which I would like, a good portion of that to then be diverted to our OPEB liability. But certainly some of that money that is in the budget, over $3 million this year, could go into our regular budget. And then the other 140 was for the OPEB. And that's the other post-employment benefit liability that the town carries. And that too, we have been funding on a regular basis out of meals tax, $140,000 a year. That is taken into consideration by our auditors and also by our rating agency. And our last rating, they even reiterated that we have been consistent in doing that. And all those things factor into how we are rated, and that's so important that we don't want to not fund our OPEB. So for that reason, using free cash makes sense for just those two items. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and I just want to kind of talk about the timeline here. So if, we'll be going to town meeting on May 5th, and if town meeting votes to support the budget, we have voted already at our last meeting to send to town meeting. We wait for the ballot vote for the override on May 17th. And that's where, if it passes, we have a balanced budget. If it doesn't, is when we have to start looking into these scenarios. But the clock really starts when the school committee now has 30 days to reassess the towns because they've now got a rejected regional school budget. They have up to 30 days to reassess. I imagine they'd do it a little sooner. The town, we would then have 45 days to call a special town meeting to vote the budget. The same process works in VOTEC. If all 4 towns that have overrides on the ballot that are VOTEC members fail to pass a VOTEC budget, VOTEC will do the same thing, reassess the towns. Each town has to hold a special town meeting.
Much to reassess, we cut it 140-something thousand.
It's still it's still a process that would have
We
to follow.
talked about that, the same number would come back.
Yeah. So knowing those, I'm looking at the scenarios. Only one of them makes operational sense for me. I know we're not going to get into, we don't want to get into specifics right now to scare departments, but I think only we're calling it draft cuts number 3 scenario is even workable as a town, as devastating as it would be to all of our departments across the board. I would make a motion to recommend that one going forward, and if no one seconds it, I can withdraw my motion, but I still think that we deserve to start preparing for the worst, because I think right now an override's probably 50-50 at best.
I'd rather wait until we had a full board, make a decision like that. Also, I was talking to Laura Kemet from Hanson, And she's saying that if one town passes an override and the second town doesn't, we both fail, or it's either both got to say yes or both got to say no. If one says yes, one says no, we go to a super town meeting. And I think we've only done that once before. We had it outside because of Hanson.
Technically, there's one round of reassessments
Yeah.
first.
Oh, yeah.
And then
Yeah.
there's a super town meeting if
Right.
there's still failure to reach a budget.
So really don't want that. So we've done it in the past, but unbelievable. Anything else?
Well, I think we want to discuss the.
Or you want to let people know whether we have meetings?
Correct. So currently, we have 3 Whitman override forums scheduled. The first one is actually tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. at the Town Hall Auditorium. We have another scheduled for April 23rd at 10 a.m. at the Council of Aging. And then again, the last one will be May 1st, 6 p.m. at Town Hall in the auditorium. So those are the 3 forums, and I know that you have a presentation put together with quite a few slides that after the forum, we'll be able to put that up on the website as well, so there'll be more information out there for the voters.
Hey, John?
John Galvin, High Street. Going back to the contingency budget discussion. Town meeting's in 3 weeks. You guys have got to make up your mind what's going on here. Because the people need to know, the voters need to know, the taxpayers need to know what happens if we vote no. The department heads need to know. The personnel need to know.
That's what they're going to just do tomorrow. Where we have,
Failed to vote the contingency, you just didn't vote on a contingency. What are you going to do tomorrow if you don't have a contingency voted?
Yeah. I think one of the concerns is obviously around personnel. If you were following the school budget, which I know you follow the school budget, but when they gave an update about what they're thinking for their contingency plan, they said, about 24 positions. They said about 14 teachers and X amount of paras. They said, for teaching wise, for their cuts, they're looking to stay away from the elementary school, so it's going to be a little bit at the middle school, high school. But what they didn't say is they're going to cut 3 history positions or they're going to cut 3 math positions. They deliberately left out the details because right now, one, there's still a lot to be considered. Again, we don't know. We're doing a scenario on about $1 million if we had to cut, and that could change drastically depending on what happens with the override.
right.
Obviously, if the override passes, that's one thing, but if it fails, the way that the schools react to a failed override significantly changes our budget. So we don't know exactly how to calculate what we're gonna be up against because we don't know exactly what the number is, period. So I think to be respectful for people, and I know on the one side, it's good to know because it helps people envision like what kind of services that they could potentially lose. So I think if we can whittle that down a little bit, like of the 14 positions that we're considering, how many public safety, how many general government, give us maybe an idea, and kind of run that by Carl. I think that would help us so that the people would know, generally speaking, how services would be impacted. But I don't support at a granular level where individuals will know. I feel like it's a really sensitive topic right now, and I want to be really careful not to upset people about that.
Just to follow up on that, the district did keep it very general, but the district also emailed every employee a PowerPoint presentation on what will happen if the override fails. So every one of their employees got notified and what the positions are. The district is also required, and I don't know the exact timeline, to send out pink slips to people whose jobs may be in jeopardy.
End of May.
I think it's 45 days, so I think it's
45 days
mid-May.
for the-
But
Well, when
I
they do
actually
that,
think it's April 30th.
They
now
do.
that I think
They
that.
usually send out blanket kind of pink slips.
Correct.
So,
But people at least know what that their job is.
so the nature of a blanket pink slip would be, much more people than would actually be laid off. So
Correct.
it's
I
not.
understand that.
Sure.
Again, back to my point that I said last week. is that if the people don't know what happens when they say no, they're going to say no. And unfortunately, you know, I know what happens, or I've seen the budget, and I know there's no room in it. I've gone through the revenue projections. We're very aggressive again with our local receipts. You know, way more than than we were told to do, way more than this board voted to do, but we needed to do it. You know, it isn't going to be pretty when the override fails. But in my opinion, it will, unless you get the information out there of what services might get affected and how bad it's going to be. Because people are just going to say, oh, they say that every year, it's never going to happen. Well, I think it will if the override fails.
Did they have that, when you said they had that meeting, did they have it on TV about making cuts? And
The
Yes.
school district meeting?
yeah.
Yeah, they always have their school district
My
meetings.
question is when they said they were going to cut teachers and paraplegics, did they say anything about management?
Yes.
I think their number was
Two
two
admins.
8 paras, and 14 teachers, positions. You know, I mean, they could cut back. I mean, they have the FTE that they can have some people be a 0.6 so you get more. I mean, it's confusing and we don't need to
Right.
get into that, but, you know, it is what it is. You know, but.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else? Yes.
Just to add one more level of complexity, I guess. Another variable that is moving right now that may come closer to not moving as much as some of the negotiations that we've been having with the unions. I've been impressed by some of the feedback that we've been getting recently with some of the unions. I feel like they're really recognizing and willing to make sacrifices, which I think is a really good sign. But we don't know exactly if they're going to close before town meeting, settle before town meeting or not. And that would be a big variable that if we could settle, we could calculate. And if we can't settle, then the calculation certainly changes, so there's a lot of levels to this budget, and it's, I appreciate John's feedback. I think we should try to get more details if we can from Mary Beth. I think ultimately this is going to kind of fall in her lap to kind of give us feedback. So more details, I think, for the forums is better, just being respectful of the sensitive nature of the topic.
I mean, I could say that as far as public safety, just off the top, that we're looking at about 5 total, public safety, police, fire, DPW, on that number, and then the balance, throughout the other major departments that have staff. I can tell you also that the $2 million override, with the override, we will have a free cash, excess levy of $302,000, which will roll into 27. And then fiscal 27 is still showing, very conservatively, showing budgets for the next 2 years at a deficit of $587,000. But fiscal 28, even with the $2 million override, I'm looking at a deficit of $1,800,000. So without the override, we stand right now, as the budget sits today, at a deficit of $1,697,000. That is after we factored in the $340,000 from free cash into the revenue. So that needs to be voted on the floor, or this deficit would be higher by $340,000. So without the override, 27, we're looking at a projection of negative 2.6 million, and 28, a deficit of 3.9 million.
All right, Mary Beth, even with the override, if the override passes, we are still running with a conservative budget, right?
Yes.
Well, do you expect the schools to do that?
I can't speak for the schools. Although it did give us a projection of the 9.65. That's the assessment that they certified for this year. And then for 27, it was over 7%, and then 28 was 6 something.
Well, even if the override passes, right, in both towns, I think the schools need to look at their budget. We are very conservative in our budget. I assume Hanson's doing the same. The schools need to do that. They need to, everybody wants a perfect Cadillac, but you can't get it. Sometimes you need a Ford. And, you know, they need to look at their budget and just work it. Just kind of be more conservative and not put both towns in financial risk. It's wrong, my opinion. John?
I would
Oh,
just-
sorry.
And I mean, Dan, I was just looking back in 2016, the schools made up 46% of our operating budget. In 2025, they made up 47%. So we're growing just as fast as the school district is.
And what is and what are they asking for this time, percentage? Okay, Sean, do you have it?
Oh, sorry, no, I was going to add another comment.
Their budget's going up about 5.5%. Ours is similar.
But their budget is more costly.
Yeah, they're assessing us 9
Yeah.
and change, but their share of the town's spending is almost exactly the same as 9 years ago.
I don't know, I'd have to look at the numbers. Okay, Sean.
I went to the school committee meeting last Wednesday, and they had some good feedback. You know, we had some some back and forth. They allowed me to speak, which I thought was nice. But I did encourage them to think about a compromise, not because I don't necessarily think that, there are certain parts of there are certain educational components that they still don't have that other districts have, and that concerns me. Just like our departments, we have departments that need things without question, but as a good strategy, I think we're more likely to get an override if we show a compromise. So it isn't necessarily that they don't deserve the money that they're asking for because they do need some new educational components. I just think if the town sees some of the increases that they see, the increase in salary, that was some of the feedback that's been brought up recently, it's very difficult to convey all this, on the town meeting floor or at the forum. I think it's much more effective if we show a little bit of a sacrifice so the town sees, look, they really do have a tight budget. It's just a better strategy. I think it's more apt to work. I am worried that if they don't budge a little bit, then people are going to see that and kind of get sour on it, So we'll see how it goes.
Ron?
I'd like to get back to Mrs. Carter's deficit projection for this year. If the override fails, it was 1,697,000.
697.
So if I'm correct, that number does not contain anything for unemployment insurance benefits that we're going to have to pay if we lay off 14 employees. Is that correct?
That does not, but out of the 3 scenarios, I ran 3 different scenarios, and those scenarios all include unemployment factored.
So the number is actually significantly higher than the 1.7 that we're actually going to have to cut because the contingency budget has to take into effect 30 or 40% more. I think the school said they used 40% in their contingency budget to pay for the unemployment insurance that. So theoretically, our deficit is more. We're cutting more like 2.3 or 2.4 million, maybe even more.
Well, we're cutting more positions to also,
Correct.
make up that
To
difference.
make up that difference.
And I factored in 40% as well. However, I feel after speaking with unemployment that the 40% is high. So I may, go back and through the calculations, reduce that to 30% after speaking with unemployment, which will help with the different scenarios as well.
I think there's 2 timelines we really need to look at. One is 3 weeks and 2 weeks after that. But as far as the actual positions or the actual cuts, if the override fails, there's significant time to go back and look at that. So if we were to present and say 14 positions and right now it's this, and this, the override fails, we can go back and look at it and see, by that time we'll maybe have more information on the unions. And so just because it's 14 now doesn't mean it will be 14 then. It might be 13, it might be 16, who knows? Depending upon what the district does when they revote. But I think, again, I'm just back to the point that we need to have some kind of, information go out in the next 3 weeks before town meeting to get that out there.
Anything else?
If nobody's going to entertain my motion, then no. No.
No? Would anybody else like to speak, about the situation? I mean, sitting here, I thought,
Might as well have a full meeting since we're here. Thank you.
yeah.
I know for public safety, we think worst-case scenario first. And going into this budget cycle and what's going to happen potentially at Town Hall, that's the bleak outlook that we have to face now. So we have to prepare for the worst. We can hope for the best all we want, but we're preparing for the worst. So, and the other thing, being a department head of the police department, we haven't been level serviced since at least 2012. And I've been going back and forth between the finance committee and here and town meetings since then. And it'd be nice to be level serviced at one point or another. And even with the override, that isn't what this picture looks like. So we're still behind the 8 ball to a certain extent, even with this override. So I don't know what the picture looks like exactly. We're not going to know, but we are preparing for the worst. So
Thank you, Chief.
thank you.
Just to reiterate, we don't exactly know what we're preparing for, but I just want to make it clear, in 2017, the townspeople spoke to increase our staffing from the 1970s. Now that we're being faced with the challenge of decreasing that staffing is super disheartening. The townspeople spoke. They passed an override, which Justin had told us we had not had very much success in previously. The townspeople spoke. We increased our staffing to 6, which I'm not going to lobby, but we all know isn't enough people for what we do. We still rely heavily on recall, and that is just by the members coming in from home to provide services to these citizens. It's disheartening, it's concerning. Like Chief Hanlon said, we'll prepare for the worst and hope for the best. But you also have to understand, and I say it all the time, my budget directly reflects the services I can provide to the citizens, or the members, I should say, provide to the citizens. If we start losing people, we start losing ambulances. We start losing ambulances, we start losing revenue. When does it stop? I just want to be clear. We're preparing for the worst, and we'll be at those meetings if people have questions. But when does it stop? We have to figure this out. And I've sworn to protect this town, and I need to have the people to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Okay. If there's nothing else, is that it? Our next meeting, is it going to, we don't have anything on the schedule, do we, for a meeting?
We do.
Tuesday.
Next Tuesday, April 22nd.
Okay, you're right, absolutely right. Maybe we can come up with some better information and make a decision then.
Whatever you'd like.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes.
You'd like.
That being said, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.